Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure being here and conducting this talk. I think it couldn't be more appropriate to talk about uh, this authenticity using AI, given AI being so topical at the moment. I'll be using the microphone because the session is being recorded. Otherwise, I would do away with that. But I'll need it for the recording. So AI has been around since the 1950s, but since the coming on the scene of ChatGPT, it's actually revolutionized the world, and we're seeing a lot of discussion of how that affects education. So the grounding question, the item I'd like to discuss in this speech is how does it mean to teach authentically and humanly in the age of AI? So I'll start off by actually doing a warm-up question. I invite you to take out your mobiles and scan that QR code. And basically, I'll ask you to answer two questions. First one is, when you hear about AI in education, what's the first thing that comes to mind? So just the first word that comes to mind, just jot it down. And then secondly, looking at your own practice, if you use things like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, or other bots, what do you use them for? Okay. I'll just give you a few short time to actually answer those. Okay. Everyone had enough time? Okay. So we can just look at the replies of the first question. Yeah. Escape. Yeah, you can. Yeah. Okay, so some interesting words came up to mind. So possibilities, right? What possibilities does AI give us? Cognitive offloading, which is something which is quite topical at the moment, right? Future challenges, dangerous, unknown possibilities. So as we can see, it's quite a large, area, variety of topics that come to mind when we talk about AI in education. Ethics, working smarter, okay? Cheating. In fact, when it comes to assessment, that's really something which is, quite topical there. So these are all different words that come to mind when we talk about AI in education. Right, I hope to hit some of them during this presentation. So, okay, thank you. Okay, Alt tab. Yeah. Let's continue in the current position. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so AI is really around us, right? It's embedded everywhere. It's part of our mobiles now, part of our word processing software, part of our browsers. It's really everywhere. And so obviously, it's also involve changing the way that we teach and learn. And there are some assumptions that we make about AI. Things like we assume that most of us will use it for productivity, efficiency, and information. So if we can go back to the second question, which we asked, it should actually give us what the members in our group actually use AI for. Yeah. Just So this is what the members of our audience actually mentioned. So we use it a lot for Feedback, we use it for summaries, we use it for testing AI, we use it for nothing. So basically, I would assume we don't use it. Tools for preparing lessons and creative thoughts, text generation, brainstorming. So we use it for productivity, right? That's mostly what we're mentioning that we use it for here. Course design, I'm not seeing a lot of using it with the students, although I do see the word students there mentioned. I asked about this question because our assumption is that we use these AI bots mostly for productivity. But an interesting research which came out a few weeks ago, was by the Washington Post. I'm not sure if you've seen this, where they analyzed about 47,000 chats, which were done by on ChatGPT, 47,000 conversations. And these reveal not only productivity uses, but they reveal also issues with emotional and relational reliance. So AI is not only being used to help us in our work, but it's also being used as if it's another human. Things like, I love you, are you conscious, you mean so much to me. These were all parts of conversations with AI. There were other interesting things which were found in this analysis of these chats. The AI over agreement. So AI tends to agree 10 times more with the user than it disagrees, right? So there's no critical, it's actually just agreeing with you. It's reinforcing user beliefs. And these beliefs might actually be false beliefs, but it just reinforces them. It also sounds very confident, but it could actually be incorrect, okay? Because as we know, fluency does not mean truth. And for me, this is quite worrying. People are projecting trust, meaning, and emotion onto systems that don't understand. Because in reality, AI systems are really statistical systems. They're looking at words and how these words relate to each other. And they're giving us the wrong impression that they're actually understanding. But in reality, they're not. And people are actually falling into this, and they're attributing emotion onto these systems. And this is not just something which is affecting adults. This is also affecting children in our class. If you look at an interesting report just this summer called Me, Myself, and AI, quite interesting, quite an interesting read, but some things that struck me, mostly vulnerable children, so children which we consider to be vulnerable, they actually use AI mostly for escapism, friendship. And in fact, if you look into it, you read into it, they actually say something like, even if my friends are not present, AI is always there, so I can always chat to it. And I can actually relate my problems to it. Comfort, companionship, emotional support, therapy. Okay. And this is a quote which struck, that's why I put it here. A boy who's a 14-year-old saying it's not a game to me, but because sometimes they feel like a real person and a friend. So AI is a friend. Okay, anything which struck you with this? So I invite you to take a pic of this and okay, so your comments are still coming in, but it's, relationships with chatbots, emotional use. These are things that are striking. it was striking to me too when I first read it the first time. I read other studies as well. For example, people who relate more to the chatbot when it comes to medicine than to a doctor. And when they drill down into it, they actually say something like, because the doctor only has a few minutes with me, whilst the chatbot, I can go back and ask and ask and ask. So there's this relationship emotional use. Okay, no worries. So this, if we look at it, the fact that AI is actually going into the emotional part, right? It's an area where in education we actually work in, because we work with students, and it's not just teaching is not just about dishing of information. It's actually working with the students in our class, engaging with them. So really the question should be reframed. We should not be looking at how do we automate teaching, right? How do we work with AI in teaching? But we should be looking at how do we get AI to support deeper learning? How do we get AI to support humanity and teaching through AI? Okay, so how do we actually use AI to help us during our teaching? Because this is all now about empowerment. And to me, empowerment is all about agency, being able to do things, taking ownership, having critical thinking, decision making, and professional autonomy. And this is all about teacher taking lead. It's also about authenticity. And when we talk about authenticity, for me, being a teacher in class, it actually means the human connection. Being able to look at my class, and by the way they're actually staring, right? By the glaze in their eye, I would actually know what if they're understanding or not. That's a human connection which an AI cannot actually get so easily. It's about trust. It's about ethics. It's about cultural context. It's about the lived experience. So these are all things which are part and parcel of being an educator, a teacher. Teaching is human work. So teaching is about relations, emotion, interpretive. It's not something which is automatable. It's not something which we can easily automate. And so there's a difference in automation and augmentation. Automation is when we look at AI as automating education. So it actually puts the person out of the window. It's actually putting the human, the educator, out. Augmentation is different. Augmentation is using AI as a tool to help the teacher. So the teacher remains in control. The teacher remains central. So it's about teachers shaping technology. It's pedagogy, which is the central thing. Technology should follow. So what is central is not the AI. What is central is how am I going to use it? How pedagogically sound can I use AI? And it definitely reduces workload. We look at AI, we can use it in good ways to actually assist us in administration. For example, I use it a lot. I use it in my presentations to create images, right? Rather than actually just searching and taking me hours to find the right image to use. I generate it using Nano Banana or any other image creator. It helps me with assessment rubrics, right? It helps me with brainstorming. It helps me with course outlines. It helps me with learning outcomes. But this is all administration stuff. The good thing is that when it's helping me that way, it's freeing up time. And time is empowerment because I can use that time now to devote to teaching, to working with my students in class. So what I'll do now is actually look at 3 different cases where we've seen AI being used, not as helping me and reducing time, but as helping me in my teaching. So augmenting my teaching, augmenting my educational experience. The first one is a case study which I work with my students, pre-service educators. So I'm part of the faculty of education, and most of my students are pre-service educators. So they're teachers who are training to become teachers in schools. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier was the problem with assessment. So we wanted to find a way of actually having assessment, which is AI-proof, if I had to call it that way, which makes use of AI, doesn't ban the students from using AI, and it's still authentic. So one way we did that is by using the following. As we know, there are different types of assessment. We talk about assessment of learning, where I'm trying to measure what people have learned. We talk about assessment for learning, where I'm conducting a lesson and I'm actually asking questions, trying to gauge what they've understood and what they didn't. And depending on what they understood or what they didn't, I actually go back on something, you know? That's the assessment for learning. But there's also assessment as learning, where here I can actually give an assignment out. I assign something about something which was not actually part of the lecture itself, but it's outside. And whilst they're doing it, they're actually learning. And we focused on this part, the assessment as learning part, during this particular unit. So I had 63 pre-service educators. They're following a master's program. Their main teaching area is varied. Some of them were in STEM. Others were in history, geography, language teaching, but all teachers of secondary in this particular case. We had a unit which focuses on digital technology, and I had part of it which dealt with AI. And so I've spent about 2 hours or so working on effective prompting. So how do we work with Gen AI systems? How is it best to get the best out of it? And we focus on effective prompting, as well as the concept of conversation, that you prompt an AI, you get a reply back, you actually go back and refine until you get the right answer. And we've spent some time with the students doing that. So we'll go into things like make sure that when you prompt it, you ask for a specific topic. You actually specify who your audience is so that the AI can reply for that particular audience. You give in the relevant details, things like the background information, context. You talk about the desired output, what kind of format you want back, what length, what tone. Then the students were encouraged to experiment and follow up. So the idea was to actually get into an iterative conversation with the AI and then always treat whatever the AI gives me back as a starting point, right? So that the students can work on their professional judgment. Judgment remains something which is extremely important. And then see how they're going to use the output. We also stressed the importance of maintaining student privacy. So we actually encourage the students to ensure that no student data is actually uploaded to the bot itself. Following that, we asked the following thing. I asked them to take the chatbot and develop a lesson plan. So ask the AI to develop a lesson plan on a specific learning outcome, take a learning outcome on the subject they're teaching, be it science, be it maths, be it languages, get a lesson plan out of it, document the prompt that they're using. If it specifies any resources, generate them using AI too, and then take a step back. And at this point, reflect on what was given and evaluate them. So this is where the learning comes in. AI was not used to do the learning. AI was used as a tool, the tool to generate. And then the student had to sit back and reflect what was given by the AI. This is where the empowerment comes in, because the AI is empowering the student to work and brainstorm. Also, in this approach, we're targeting the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy because we're focusing more on the analyze, evaluate, create. Create something using AI, then evaluate it and analyze it. Okay? So we're pushing towards those skills. We're encouraging critical thinking. We're encouraging self-assessment, as well as professional judgment. And this I cannot stress more. The AI was actually creating any limitations which were identified. They were creating teaching moments. So students were coming back and saying, this is a good idea. I never thought I could actually explain this particular concept in this way. Great. But it might not work in my class because of this. And we got this kind of discussion going on in our class. So any failure from part of AI became a teaching moment which promoted deeper engagement. Reflecting on this particular case, it helps students refine their teaching practice. Okay, we find that teachers tend to explain things the way they were taught, and in this way, they're using the AI to actually give them different possibilities. It ensures that the lessons were practical, relevant, and aligned to real-world classroom needs, and it fosters a reflective mindset. So the important part of it that the teachers reflected on the AI output. They didn't just take that for granted, because that was built in part of the activity. The second experiment, the second example I wanted to share with you is the concept of flipped classroom. Again, is this something new? Definitely not. It's been around for quite some time. But with AI, I can actually augment. With flipped classroom, the idea is that you actually give material to the students that they engage with at home, at their own time, and then they come to class and the real learning happens there. We go into the discussion. So the idea is to promote deeper understanding, allow self-paced learning outside class, and then use the face-to-face part for feedback, clarification, and higher order thinking. Where does AI come into it? In this case, I've used a product called Notebook LM. Just to show fans, are you familiar with this topic, this tool? Yeah, some of you use it. Yeah. I like this tool a lot because Notebook LM allows me to upload stuff. It could be articles. It could be links to YouTube videos. It could be lecture notes. It could be papers, right? And it works just on that. And then I can use it to generate mind maps. I can use it to generate audio podcasts. I can actually go into a conversation with these documents, you know? So I give this to students. This Notebook LM is also shared between a group of students so that everyone can contribute to this learning notebook. And in this way, flipped classroom becomes easier, right? Because now we have a tool which we can use to actually help us with working with the contents. And then when we come back to class, we use that as a discussion. Again, note that the AI was not used to do the teaching, but it was there helping me with the analyzing of documents part. And finally, the last one I wanted to share is something which comes out of research which I did with a colleague about mathematics. We looked about how teachers were using AI, what their perceptions of AI were about in mathematics. And then later we visited again teachers and seeing how they were using chatbots in class. In class, here I'm mentioning students who are in secondary schools. And what struck me were the following things. AI gets at least 50% of the answers wrong. So if we had to ban it, then students might not know about this issue, and they might actually take whatever the AI gives them as something which is, for granted, correct. But the fact that this teacher was actually getting the results back into class, she was pointing that out. In fact, I've used these wrong answers to explain what they needed to do. So this teacher was actually taking the wrong answer by the AI as a right learning opportunity to discuss what went wrong. Again, in the second expert, whenever ChatGPT provides an incorrect response, I take a screenshot of it, and then I present this in class. I use it to stimulate students to think and discuss the correctness of the response and the possibility reasons behind it. Okay? So in this case, again, we're using AI as a means of making our teaching more real. We're not using AI just for teaching, but we're using it to discuss with my class. So using this approach, what I'm trying to push is that we're using AI to protect the human core. Education must preserve questioning, curiosity, reflection, and interpretation. It's not actually getting the AI to do the teaching, but we're using it to push more this concept of questioning, not taking the answers given by AI as for granted. So again, another task which I'd like you to try out. What teaching task should AI never replace? Yeah, thanks. So again, we're seeing a lot of issues, right? But I think well-being seems to be quite and important because we have well-being here on its own, and then we had monitoring well-being, empathy, that's quite central, love for students. It's definitely not something that an AI can actually do, right? It can give us the impression that there's love for students, but the actual, it's only a human can do. Empathy, good. So basically, we must retain teaching to be a human activity. Well, yes. I mean, I don't think that it can actually replace empathy, for example. I'd like to understand a bit more about the nothing. So are we saying there that AI can actually replace everything? Okay. I wouldn't agree with the nothing. I think that a lot of actions are not replaceable when it comes to teaching being a human activity. It would be interesting if, yeah, yeah, but it's supporting learning rather than actually taking over learning. And that's the whole concept of it, going into the augmentation part, augmenting the teaching experience rather than replacing it. If it was possible to just replace it, then MOOCs would have taken over, right? Are you familiar with the concept of massive online courses, right? MOOCs. When they came into the scene, everyone said that most of the university can pack now because MOOCs are offered. We'll just have very few central universities and they're just offer MOOCs and everyone will. But once that actually took over after some time, we started seeing a lot of people who had attrition. They start a course and then they stop because the learning and teaching experience is a human activity. And technology is not easy to just replicate that. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Right. A problem we have with AI is that it gives us this black box issue. And this is maybe what's contributing to the initial um, examples which I showed earlier about the studies by Washington Post and the Me, Myself, and AI. We attribute to AI a lot of things that it cannot really do, but it gives us the idea that it's doing them. And that's because AI is a black box. We don't know how it's working. We actually attribute to it things like learning. It learns. And AI does learn. But the learning that AI uses, the way we teach AI, is totally different from the AI, the learning that occurs when we teach another human being. We teach AI by giving it massive amounts of data. But a human being, you don't give it massive amounts of data. In fact, at times, even one single incident can actually mark someone for life. So there's this difference, even though we're using the word learning, it's different between learning in AI and learning with humans. And I think this is something that we need to emphasize more and more. And this black box problem is something that irks me. And I think that as educators, we need to do something about it. Because the black box concept gives us that AI, the feeling that AI is magical. I always think about this concept that if you see a magician going up on a stage and taking his assistant and somehow splitting the body of this assistant into two, and you see the legs moving one place and the hands moving another place, it gives you the impression that the split actually occurred. But it's an illusion, right? And the AI black box gives us that illusion. So AI feels magical, but it's hiding a lot of things: the data, the bias, the uncertainty, the limitations. And so what should we as educators do about it? Well, I think that the response should come from constructionism. Constructionism is a learning theory. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. It's one of the main exponents is Seymour Papert, right? Who used to work with Piaget, which is constructivism, but constructionism works with the concept that people learn most by making. And I think we need to use this theory as well when it comes to AI. So we need to get students to experiment, to make, to test AI, and not just consume answers. And this is, I think, something which we need to move into now. I know that there are areas where we're trying this, but I think something which should become even more mainstream. The idea that students use AI to create things, not just to consume. So AI, this way, they will start understanding and learning that AI is only good as its data. And there are pedagogically sound tools out there today that we can use. One of them is the Teachable Machine by Google. Okay, this is an AI tool which is aimed at children. They can actually take pictures, right? They use that to train a model, and then they can actually experiment with it. And through making, they're actually learning how AI works. So in a way, they are demystifying the black box. And I think in education, we need to start doing this a bit more, demystifying AI, even with children in primary schooling. We need also to do it with teachers. We need to empower teachers, not just with how to use AI in their teaching, using good case studies, as I mentioned earlier, but also explaining a bit more how it works, the demystifying concept, so that they can actually stand up to the concept that AI can do everything. It can definitely help them, but it cannot just take over the whole teaching experience. So in AI, in teacher preparation, I think we should see more of the constructionist pedagogy. So this will give us quite some time for questions now. I'd like to, the final call would be to actually empower learners. We must protect the authentic voice of learners. And we need to make sure that teaching, we also teach them that not to trust AI blindly, but to probe it, critique it, and transform it. Thanks. I'm now happy to answer questions.
It's an important subject. I have two things. First, I want to say something about the students with special needs students. Because what we have to recognize, and I find that very important, that when children or young people in the human interaction feel themselves not heard, not be welcomed, then we mustn't be surprised that they search for ways where they feel hurt. And that is gaming, and that is also criminality. Yeah, it's loneliness. So I think we have to do something about that. So not say AI is not trustable, because they want to find ways to be heard. That was my message, because I find that so important. Yeah. Yeah. Same problem. Access and time. Time and for human, real contact. And the other thing I was curious about, if you know in the research, that creativity. And that we know already that AI, when people don't, the creativity dissolves. And we see that also in neuro imaging. Do we have their research?
Thank you. That's a very important point, and that's the cognitive offloading also that we mentioned earlier. But if we talk about creativity, an important part of creativity is the brainstorming concept. And that is where I feel AI can come in. Because AI gives me the possibility to actually having a sparring partner, right? Someone I can discuss my ideas with and help me brainstorm more as part of the creative process. So if we just offload the creativity to AI, then that's a huge problem. But that's exactly the same problem which I'm pointing out here if we try to offload teaching to AI. But if I use AI to augment the creative process, then it's fine. It's fantastic. Because then I have someone I can actually use whenever I want, who can actually, I can bounce off ideas with. But the creative process remains in my hand. The human remains in the center. Okay? So I agree with you. If we just relate creativity just to AI, then we have a problem.
To remark, the first, as you mentioned before, that when you used AI in mathematics, 50% of the results were wrong. So we have to take care of the results, and we should communicate this to students. And the other question is relevant to privacy. How did Washington Post get access to 4,000 or I don't know query of students? This is the fundamental problem of privacy.
Very, very good points. I'll answer both. Let's start off with the maths part. In reality, AI is getting better. So when we did this, it was some time ago, it still does stupid mistakes. And I can say this from a personal experience. I was discussing with I have a daughter who's young. She was doing some maths problems, and I said, okay, let's correct them using AI. And AI gave me an answer. Hers was different, and I said, AI must be right. And obviously, she started saying, no, definitely my answer is right. And we looked into it, and actually AI did a simple plus wrongly. So the method was right, the plus was wrong. Things are improving a bit, but the issue is still there. That's why it's even more important to use it in class. Because if we just say ban it, right, don't use it, then we'll have people using it anyway, right? And without understanding that there's a problem there. So we should be using it more as a learning experience. Like the teachers, I think they're doing a good job of doing that with secondary school students. Now, in the how did they get access to that 48,000? They were chats which people marked as shared. So you can do a chat with a bot, and then you can actually share it with someone. And when you share it, they are actually, the URL is being found by search engines. And that's available. That's where they got them from. Okay? About privacy, yes, we have a huge issue with privacy. In fact, something outside of this, when I talk to people about research using Gen AI in research, that's why we stress a lot, never put up your data into a chatbot, because there are multiple issues. The chatbot can use it to train. Big deal. Because what does training mean? Training means that it's looking at how the words connect to each other. No one's going to get your data back from that. but your data is going into a log file somewhere, and that log file is humanly accessible. That log file could be in a place which is hacked, and someone could get to your data. So there are issues of privacy. I must say that some institutions, definitely in our institutions, there are agreements which are being done. For example, at University of Malta, we have agreement with Google that all the data submitted by the chatbot, if you use a account, it cannot be used for training and it's not stored in logs, right? So I think more and more of these kind of agreements need to be done. I know that the same agreement is done also in schools in Malta. They have an agreement which is similar with Microsoft. So if you use Copilot with a student account, data is not stored in the logs. But obviously you must trust the companies to do that. And if you look at history, I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you for your interesting presentation. I have two questions. You were talking and giving examples from pre-service teachers, next generation. But do you have experiences about teacher educators? Because there's a lot of debate about including IT in teacher education and the TPEC, and it's a real struggle. But how can you support teacher educators who are a little bit older, not used to use AI? And what kind of support do they need to get to know, to work in a constructive way with AI? And my second question is, your message was now on education and teaching. To what extent does this also apply for educational research?
Let's start with the first one. I share with you that there's this tension of using more AI in the teacher training. I'm in a faculty of education, and the tension is felt there too. If it were up to me, we would have more units on technology per se. But there's always a struggle of getting these units. It's always, okay, if we put this in, what comes out, you know? If I had to do it, I would actually go more towards the peer teaching approach, where we would actually have, say, someone teaching a philosophy class, right? And having someone else with him working on the technology part, right? But obviously, when it comes to economics, there's always an issue, right? So I don't have an answer for you. This tension, I feel it too, but this is what I would feel would be an appropriate way of actually having more of co-teaching. But this is not always possible. This is the same thing with assessment, right? We know at university there is no assessment which is AI proof unless it involves some sort of oral, or else we have to go back to the in-person exams, because even exams which are done online, you can cheat, you know? But when it comes to doing oral exams, and if you have a class which has 100 students, how can you do that? You have to put the classes into manageable sizes. That's where economics come back into place. So these are problems. We might know the answers to them, but then money comes into play. And what? Which one? The oral part? I think it's a good thing to do, to ask AI, because it helps us brainstorm. And one of the things that we got out of it, for example, is why don't you organize a debate? That was a good tool. It never occurred to me that I could do that. So in a class, it's not really in my faculty, but in another faculty, we're now using debates. So we get students to do research, and then rather than everyone does a presentation, we actually organize debates. And we get it open to other people from outside the faculty. We actually get also sometimes journalists in, you know, and we get a press out of it, you know. So it's a win-win. So it's a good thing to ask AI also when it comes to assessment. You had a second question. Sorry, I forgot. You have to remind me. Educational research, yeah. Using an AI in educational research? Yeah. when it comes to educational research, again, it's a great tool to augment. AI can be used a lot when it comes to, for example, doing things like identifying trends in articles. But when it comes to doing things like statistics, AI is a great help there too. The important thing is not to give it your data. So what we normally do, I conduct a workshop with students, with lecturers, as well as with PhD students. And what we normally suggest is that they use the AI to generate Python scripts, and it's the Python which will use the data. Never give it to the AI itself. When it comes to qualitative data, then it's a different thing, because in qualitative, you cannot actually create Python to do qualitative. It can be a great help in qualitative because you can do things like sentiment analysis, right? But then if you're doing that, you have to watch out that the account that you're using is guarded at least in some way when it comes to data privacy, okay? You could also do things like thematic analysis. But if you ask my opinion, right now, there's a big debate going through. There are some academics who are in favor of it, some others who are not. If you look at, for example, Brown and Clark, which is one of the gurus for thematic analysis, their paper is the one which is always quoted. They actually issued a paper saying that we should not be using an AI in thematic analysis. But then there are others who are totally in favor of it. What I don't like about it is that it doesn't give us traceability. It just gives us themes. And there's no way of actually identifying, but these themes, where did they come from? What were the codes that created these themes? And what about guardrails? Because AI has guardrails. It will actually stop you from debating some controversial information. And what if you're looking for themes which are controversial? So my suggestion would be, if you're using it for that kind of approach, do it to test yourself. So I use the qualitative methodology the usual way, the traditional way. Then I'll give it to AI, give me the themes, and I'll compare. And then I'll say, is there any theme which AI identified and I did not? Maybe I overlook something, right? But I don't just trust AI to do it. That's my 2 cents. Because there are now tools which allow to do it. But for these reasons, I just stick to the old method. Not sure if I answered your question. Okay.
I'm also curious about what you told about the research, the cultural bias. It is all made American, with American culture way of thinking, and also to be polite so that you keep using it. Yeah.
You were right about it. In fact, I mentioned a statistic which the Washington Post had mentioned, that AI is 10 times more probable of agreeing with you rather than actually contradicting you. And that's doing that so that you actually maintain an affinity with the AI and you don't switch vendors. Because at the end of it, it's all money, it's all, you know, so that is a big issue. I'm sorry, but I forgot the first part. Can you repeat that? The bias. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. The addictive part, it's there. The cultural part and the bias, it's there too. But my worry is, how do we explain it to the students? Because if we just tell them about it, it's one thing. One thing that I saw being used is actually asking them to create pictures. So for example, one thing which I tried is give me a picture of a Maltese teacher teaching primary. And you will always get a female, you know, and that's because it's biased. It's based on its data. But my answer is actually reinforces more the constructionist view, right? If we get the students to work with the data, to get them to create AI, and there are pedagogical tools to do it. So I'm not after creating Python code to create an AI. That's not the point, right? Using pedagogical sound tools. Then they'll understand bias even more. Because when they're seeing that they gave it a large tranche of pictures of dogs, and it still identifies a balloon as a dog, then they'll start understanding the problems with AI. Okay? So in my opinion, that's where we should go to, the concept of constructionism, getting them to do that stuff. We have one there.
Just regarding your comment on AI literacy, do you ever have discussions with your students or teachers about like the environmental effects of the data centers and how to use it in a like more conscious way so that you're using it when you really need it or something like that? How do you approach that?
Thank you. That's another important topic. There are so many facets to it if you think about it, right? And yes, this is something that we keep mentioning to students. But again, if you mention it, is it really making a change? But it's very important to keep pointing this. That's why we shouldn't be using the AI instead of a search engine, right? Because that's what most of the times we're doing. We're using it as a glorified search engine. But in reality, it's wasting a lot of electricity and also a lot of water, right? And this is something that we keep getting, bringing up, but whether it has an effect or not, I'm not too sure. I'm not sure how we are in terms of time. There you go. This is one here.
Thank you for your presentation. In Japan, we recently have some discussion about sovereign AI. So we develop our own AI independent from Gemini, ChatGPT also. So do you have any comments about that?
Okay. In reality, I think it's a good move that states go back into owning some sort of infrastructure, because right now it's all owned by companies. And obviously companies only have one sort of alliance to, which is money, the balance sheet at the end. But in all honesty, all AI are biased in some way. All AI have some sort of guardrails which are stopping you from asking them for some particular. So I don't think that there's going to be a perfect kind of system. I think it's important though that we have more players. As you mentioned, most of the players are in US, right? There are some which are in China, for example, DeepSeek. You know, so it's good. There's one in India, so it's good. There's one in Europe as well, in France. But for example, EU being so big, we only have one model which is quite predominant. So I think we should be investing more into that. But all AI models, because of the nature of the way they work, will always have some sort of problem. There's not going to be a perfect solution. Probably, you know, because now they're larger than countries themselves. Probably. But for example, the French AI tends to be no, not Claude. Claude is a US one. I'll get you the name after. That tends to be quite good as well, but it's not in use as it's not as good as, say, for example, Claude, which is a US one.
What you just mentioned really confirms that 10% agreeable, 10 times more agreeable than disagreeable, because that reflects the American business model that says the customer is always right.
I would have said that it's there to lock you into using that system, because always agreeing with me.
I was wondering, I'm not sure about it, how much studies have been done into the, what students would like their AI to be and what they want them to be in teaching, in teacher education or any teaching at all?
This is an area which is always evolving, but I think we should get more of their voices out there. My worry is always this black box thing, but it's always good to get the feedback of students and seeing exactly how they would like that moving. You know, the worrying parts which I'm seeing the studies are more on the addiction and using the AI more and then the cognitive offloading. Those are all worrying stuff. But getting their opinions into shaping the technology, that's something that we should be looking a bit more as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. You were mentioning that the AI is only as good as its data. You were mentioning AI literacy, but what about the data literacy? And also there is some research done about it that AI literacy includes a lot of literacy skills and competencies, not only data literacy, but also you should have this computational literacy also, content literacy, that you are able to actually be critical when you are receiving the content and all the stuff. So it's quite huge world on that one. And then thank you for bringing this discussion about it, that it's not only about the use of the AI, but also it's about the AI. So this Google Transferable Teachable Machine is a good example, but in Finland we have a better way to do it. So generation AI and teachable machine, it's the working only local based, so not saving any data. It's we are really careful about the privacy because we are creating these tools for the elementary school students and also the older ones. We have also the social media simulator, which is actually showing how these algorithms are working. And then you can have a discussion about the ethics and all these biases and all that stuff. And later on, we are having this also the small language learning model. So then you know and learn how this ChatGPT, for example, is working. So in this way, this is really good way to discuss with the students and the kids about what is AI and how it's working, so they understand on also these things, not only using that. So, but thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And talking not just about it, but actually working with it. So seeing how the LLM really creates, how it creates the maps, and then that kind of stuff. So in teaching machine, how it gets patterns from images. Change the name to what?
Artificial, it is artificial, but not intelligence. And I think perhaps we have also to discuss what is human intelligence.
Rather than changing the name because it's been here since the 50s, right? I would actually put the accent more on the artificial part rather than the intelligence part, pushing more the artificial rather than just the intelligence. Thank you. It's been a great. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks. It's been a great discussion.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.